Hello, the topic for this video is the Excel worksheet function VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP has been available since Excel 2000. I'm using Excel 2013. If you have an older version of Excel, the VLOOKUP commands are the same. However, how you access some things may be slightly different, especially if you are using a version of Excel prior to 2007. What you're looking at right now is the table of contents. The purpose of this is in case you want to go back to, after you watch this video, go back and take a look at something. This shows you what I'll be covering and what sheet and row number each one of those things are on. I'm going to be doing things in this order, so this will help you to get back to a certain topic. So we'll start with sheet 1. Okay, VLOOKUP. The V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. What it does is if you have a table like the one I have here and the items are listed vertically from top to bottom, what this VLOOKUP will do is you'll be able to take an item in your table in the leftmost column, for example, gadget, and if you have that information, then you'll be able to look up any of the other things in the table under gadget. So kind of like your address book or your contact list. If you know the person's name, once you have that, you can then go ahead and look up their phone number, their email address, or any other information you have stored in that table. Each one of these functions make up the arguments for the syntax of VLOOKUP. We'll go over each one of these. VLOOKUP, the lookup value. The lookup value is what you're looking up. So for example, gadget or widget in this table. The table array is the table that has all the information. The column index, that is the index of what you want to get. So starting with your, if you look at your table array, this would be column 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then range lookup is an optional function. If you notice in the syntax it has brackets. The brackets mean it's optional. However, it will default to true. And if that's what you want, you can just omit it. However, if you want false, then you'll have to type in either false or 0. And we'll go over each one of these as we do examples. So our first example is a simple VLOOKUP command. And I'll start by for a worksheet function, we need to type in the equal sign. So we'll start with equals for all worksheet functions, and then we'll type in VLOOKUP. So I'll type in, I just begin to type, and you'll notice if I type in VL, actually just VL, I'll already identify that VLOOKUP is the only command beginning with VL. So I can then just hit the tab key, and then it gets the entire word VLOOKUP plus the opening parentheses. Now in this help screen here, you'll notice that the first command or the first argument that we need to type in is in bold, and that is the lookup value. So that is what in this table we're going to look up. So let's just assume we're going to look up gadget. So for text, I need to put that in quotes. So open quotes and then type in the word gadget, close quotes. So I'll be looking up gadget, then a comma. Next thing I need to do is put in the table array. That's the table of which I'm going to be looking up data. Now the lookup value must be in the leftmost column. So I'm going to highlight the table all the way from cell B5 to E8. And there's my table array. So comma. Column index number, that is what I want. In this case, I want the part ID for gadget. So that is in the 1, 2, second column. So I'll put a number 2. Comma. Then either true or false. True is for approximate match and false is for exact match. What we're going to do is right now do exact match, which is false, meaning the word gadget must find that exact match in the table. We'll work on an approximate match a little bit later. So I'll put in false. I can just down arrow to false and hit the tab key and go ahead and close my parentheses and hit enter. So there's my first VLOOKUP function done. I looked up gadget and I got the part ID. So 65G235, and here it is 65G235. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next example, and this is a more practical case in where rather than putting what you're looking up in the actual syntax, it's actually, in this case, it's in another cell already, the cell to the left. So we will do just that. We'll start out with equals VLOOKUP, which is VL tab, which puts in the whole word VLOOKUP, open parentheses, and then I want to look up the value to the left. So I'll hit the left arrow, or I can click on that cell, and that gives me cell B16. Then comma, table array. We'll go ahead and highlight our table array from B5 to E8, comma, column index number. What do I want to look up? I want to look up the part ID. In my table array, part ID is the second column. So I'll put a 2, comma, and then we're going to stick with exact match, which I can put in false or I can put in 0. So I'll just put in 0. I'll hit enter. It'll put the closing parentheses for me, and there it is done. I have device, and I looked up this part number, and here it is here. Now I also want to show that the lookup value is not case sensitive. I can type in device with a capital D and get device. I can put in widget in all capitals, and in this case I will get the answer or the part ID for widget by typing in widget. So not case sensitive. We're moving on. This will just give you a very similar but slightly different example, and where before I showed you how to look up part ID, in this case I want to show you how to look up retail. So in here we'll start again with equals VLOOKUP, lookup value, the column to the left, which is cell B21, comma, the table array. I'm going to highlight the table array again from B5 to E8, comma, column index number. This time I want retail. In my table array, the retail is in the 4th column, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll type in 4, and we want the exact match, which again is widget. It needs to find exactly the word widget here. So that'll be a 0 for exact match, and enter. And here I've done it. Now I already formatted this cell for a $, otherwise it would just return the value of 39.95. But I did already format this in $, so I get $39.95 here, which is for widget. Now as you saw before, this is a completely dynamic function, so if I change widget to sprocket, I will get $14.95, which is the retail value for sprocket. I could also change the retail value in the table of sprocket to say $13.95, and then this will automatically change to $13.95. So as things change, VLOOKUP will constantly update. Okay, moving on to absolute range. In this table here, I have 3 part names, and I'm going to get the part ID for the corresponding part names. And we'll do that using VLOOKUP just like we have been doing. So I'll type in our equals VLOOKUP, then my cell to the left, which is B26, comma, my range, which is B5 through E8, comma, my column index, I want part ID, which is the 2nd column, so 2, comma, and 0 for absolute, for exact match, excuse me. So there I go, there I have it. So widget, I get the corresponding part ID. Now I'm going to copy this down, and it works for gadget, but it does not work for device. Now why is that? Well, when I copied this down, this reference here changed 1 down each time I copied it. So here it's now B6 through E9, and here it is B7 through E10. And notice B7 starts here with gadget, and device is outside of that range, so it couldn't find it. I got the NA. It did work for this gadget here because it started now at B6. Well, gadget is still in that range, so that one worked. So whenever we copy down, the reference moves along with it unless we make it absolute. So to make it absolute, I'll show you how to do that. We'll start over. I'll start with E equals VLOOKUP. Then my lookup value is 1 to the left, cell B26, comma, my table array. I'll highlight the table. Now I'm going to use the F4 key. When I use the F4 key, it puts $signs in, as you notice, in front of both the row and column IDs. So the B, in front of the B, there's a $sign. In front of the 5, there's a $sign. Also in front of the E and the 8. That makes it absolute. When it's absolute, it will not change as I copy it to other cells. So I put the comma, I'll continue with the 2, comma, and the 0, and enter. And now when I copy this down, I get the correct part IDs for the corresponding part names, because now in this cell I still have B5 through E8. So from this point on forward, whenever I refer to a table array, I will make it absolute. Another way to do things is we can name the table array. So how do we do that? There's many ways to get to naming a table, so we'll just look at them here. So what I'll do first is highlight my table array, and then over here in the name box I can go ahead and type in the name of the name I want to name this table, and I can name it anything I want. Another way we can do this is we can right click and go to define name, and here we can also identify the name of this array, which is these cells here. Basically we're giving those cells their own name. We can, let's see, another way to do it is we can go to data, to formulas, and we can go to define name, and once again I'll be able to name it here. And then finally, if we prefer to use the keyboard, we can just do Alt MMD, and that'll also call up the new name box. So we're going to go ahead and give it a name, and I'm going to call this TBL parts. And you'll see that I did that on purpose, TBL, for all my table arrays, because it'll make it easier later when we're trying to find things. So if you notice, it refers to sheet 1, which is where I'm at now. Sheet 1, the cells B5 through E8, and they are absolute. So table parts refers to this table right here that I have highlighted. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now I'm going to do the same thing here with VLOOKUP equals VLOOKUP. The left arrow to highlight cell B33, comma, my table array, which is TBL. Now notice TBL, it automatically came up with table parts. If I have a number of tables and I label them all TBL, I can go right to TBL and I get a list of all my tables. That's why I start off all my table names with TBL. However, you can name anything you want. I'll hit the tab key to get the entire table parts in there. Comma, column index, part ID is the column I'm interested in my table. That is the second column, 2, comma, and 0 for exact match. And there I have my part ID for device. I can copy this down, and you'll see if you look at each one of these formulas, table parts was put in for each one of them. Table parts, and it basically is an absolute range. Now, what if your table is on another sheet? Typically that's actually the case, because your table could be quite large, taking up a large part of the spreadsheet. So typically your table will be on another sheet, and we will need to refer to that. So how do we do that? Very similar. We'll start off with equals VLOOKUP. Our lookup value is to the left, comma, our table array. Well, on sheet 2 I have a very similar table here. Here it is. It actually is the same table, just it's on sheet 2. Now it's important, after I highlight this table, I don't go back to sheet 1, because then I'll start referencing sheet 1. So I just go ahead and hit comma. We want the part ID, so number 2, comma, and 0 for false, enter. And there it is. This is referring to the table on sheet 2. If you notice in the formula, it put in sheet 2 in single quotes with an exclamation point. That shows that this table array is on sheet 2 and B6 through E9 in this case. Now what I said I was going to do and I didn't is always use F4. I'll do that now. Makes it absolute. And I could just as well name that table and give it a different table name if I so choose, and use the table name instead of the cell references. So there's part ID. Now, table on another workbook, also very similar. I already have open another workbook, and it's called VLOOKUP _TBL, And here's my table right here, and I'm going to use this table for my worksheet function. So I'll come back here, table on another workbook. I want to look up Sprocket on that table in the other workbook. So I'll start off the same, equals VLOOKUP. My lookup value is to the left, comma. My table array, I will go to that table on the other workbook, highlight the table, F4 to make it absolute, and comma. Remember, don't go back to your other workbook now, because it'll start referring to those cells until you hit that comma. Now, column index 2 and 0. Close the parentheses, enter, and back to where I was, and here I am referring to the other workbook. Now notice in the syntax, the second argument for table array, it shows the name of that workbook, which is VLOOKUP_table.xlsx in brackets. So it's referring to that on sheet 1 exclamation point and the cell references. Now, if I close that workbook and come back here, and let's take a look at it now. Now it shows the actual path where that table is. So just VLOOKUP was okay as long as the table was open or the workbook was open, but now that it's closed, it automatically updates this to the path where the workbook is, and it will completely update even though that workbook is closed. I'll type in gadget, and that updates, and it is updating from the other workbook. Okay, NA result. Sometimes you will get an NA for result. When you get that, it's because it cannot find the part, or in this case the part name, for what's in this table. So in other words, if device was not in here and I had my VLOOKUP formula, I would get the NA result. That's the most common reason for getting it. Let's take a look. So equals VLOOKUP, comma, the cell to the left, comma, whoops, put a comma in there too soon, cell to the left, comma, TBL parts, comma, 2 for column 2, comma, 0, and okay, no problems there. Now let's say I misspelled device, or I put, let's say devices. It won't be able to find devices, so I get the NA result. Basically it's saying this part is not in this list, and it needs to be looking at the leftmost column of your table array. So if you also define your table array incorrectly and you start it right here, it's not going to find device in the most left column. So that basically it's saying in your leftmost column of your table array, it cannot find the lookup value. So a misspelling could be the reason, or possibly your table reference could be the reason. So let's go ahead and put, let me put something else here, spring. So there is no spring part name, so I get NA. Another time I'll get NA, it's very similar, it's basically I can't find it, but if this is a blank cell and I have a formula referring to a lookup value with a blank cell, I'll also get the NA result. So let's see that here. VLOOKUP. My lookup value is to the left, cell B51. My table array is TBL parts. Column index is 2, 0 for false. And I got the NA because this is blank. Even if I had a blank in one of the part names, like for example here, I will still get an NA. This has to have some value in it, and it doesn't, so I get the NA. So let's put gadget back there. Okay, so how do we get rid of these NAs? Well, we'll come over here to our formula. Spring isn't in the list, so what we want to do is we want to tell the user, if they put in something that's not on the list, that it's not a part, or not on the list, or whatever words you choose. So what we can do here is we can use the if NA worksheet function, open parentheses. Now what that's going to do is I'm going to give 2 arguments. The argument if it's not NA, and which is right here already, so I'm going to go to the end of this function so far, comma, and then the value if it is NA. So if this is NA, what do I want as a output? So I'm going to put not a part in quotes and close my parentheses and hit enter. And there we go. Spring is not a part. If I put in gadget, I'll get the gadget number. Now, if I put in blank, I'm going to get not a part. Well, blank is true, is not a part, but however, typically when you start your form, you're not going to have anything there, and you really don't want not a part there. So what we can do is we can fix that, and I'll show you how to make it so if there's a blank here, we don't get an NA. So start off with the if command. Now the if is a logical test. I do a test. If the value of my test is true, I have an output. If the value of my test is false, I have a different output. So what we'll do is we'll say if the cell to the left, right, whoops, if the cell to the left, there we go, is equal to the empty string, which is double quotes, comma. So if this is true, if the cell to my left is the empty cell, or an empty string, then, comma, if that's a true statement, I'm going to just put the empty string. So basically I have a blank box under part ID when the part name is blank, comma, the false part. If it's not blank, then give me the value of the VLOOKUP. And we'll just go ahead and close my parentheses for the if statement and hit enter. And there we go. I have a blank cell under part name and my part ID is blank. If I have something here, I get the part. And I just went to caps lock, but that just showed you that it's not case sensitive. Let me undo that. Now, if I have something that's not a part, I get NA. So basically, I have to combine these two things here. So let's go ahead and do that. If, we'll start with VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, the value to the left, comma, table parts. Column index is 2 and 0. Alright, I got NA because this is blank. So this won't fix it, but if it was something that's not in the table, this part will fix it. So let me demonstrate that. Right now I'll put in spring. Okay, so for my VLOOKUP, I'm going to say if NA, I want this value if I'm not NA. So I'll just leave this right here, go to the end, comma, if I am NA, meaning the spring is not in the table, then I'll put not a part, not a part. Alright, so basically I have what I had right up here. Now I want to combine that with if the cell to my left is blank, then just return a blank. So starting here right after the equal sign, if, open parentheses, my test, the cell to the left, that moves inside the box, I gotta click it, the cell to the left is equal to the empty string, which is double quotes, comma, return double quotes, return a blank, else return the if NA statement. So basically I've combined the two above into one statement, and if I got all my parentheses right, yes I did. Okay, spring, not a part. Device, nope, I get a part ID because device is a part. If I leave this blank, I get a blank. So that's pretty much what I want to do to get rid of those NAs. The next topic is wildcards. Wildcards are characters that can represent any character or a string of characters. For this example, I have GAD with the wildcard is asterisk. Asterisk can represent any number of characters, so this will be a match for gadget. Another wildcard is the question mark, where the question mark only represents a single character. So let me demonstrate. I'll put the VLOOKUP here equals VLOOKUP, and the lookup value is 1 to the left, cell B59, comma, my table, which is TBL parts, my index number, which is 2 for parts ID, and my range lookup is 0, and only exact matches will work with wildcards. So here I got the result for gadget. The part ID for gadget is listed here, and I only typed in GAD asterisk. Now I could also put the asterisk anywhere in the field. I could put something like this, GET, and notice that could be a result for either gadget or widget, so it's going to give me the first one, in this case gadget. If I just put in asterisk ET, then it's going to give me the first result for sprocket, because the first match it sees with the ending in ET is sprocket. So you got to be careful when using wildcards. Now we could also put the wildcard character into the formula where I don't have to put it in my lookup. So here I'll do it again, VLOOKUP. I'll start out with the cell to the left, which is B62. Here I'm going to now add, using the ampersand, the wildcard character, which is the asterisk. So now I'm going to say whatever's in B62, add to that an asterisk, and that'll make it a wildcard character. So, comma, my table, TBL parts, my index number 2, and 0 for false. Alright, and I got an error, and that's because I forgot a comma after the table. Okay, so here WID gives me a result for 754U7Y. Here it is, 754U7Y, the part ID for widget, and all I typed in was WID. So that is another way you can use wildcards, putting it inside the VLOOKUP. Now I'm going to copy this one here, use Control C and then Control V here, and copy that. Notice I get a result even though my part name is blank, and that's because if you look at my formula, it's saying whatever's in cell B65, which is nothing, add to that the wildcard character. Now I have just nothing plus the wildcard character. I have just the wildcard character, which means anything. So give me a match for anything. So in this case, it's going to give me whatever it finds first, device, and I get an answer. So whenever you use the wildcard, it's a good idea to also include the actual part name. So that way, when the person types in something with the wildcard, in this example, if he just types in WID, he wants to make sure he got the right thing, you can also return the part name. So I'm going to do that here to show you that example. So here we have VLOOKUP, the cell to the left, the AND symbol, double quotes, asterisk, double quotes, comma, my table, TBL, and that's table parts, comma, my index number, which in this case is going to be 1 because I want the part name, which is in my first column, comma 0. Okay, so, and I get widget. So now I know when I typed in WID, what I'm really looking up is widget. And then here I can include the part ID. So I could just copy this one here, bring this over here. Let's modify it a little bit. Okay, it's not going to be cell C68. We want cell B68 because that moved over one when I copied it. And then we want column 2, which is the parts ID. So there we go. So this is just something helpful so that when the person types in a part of a name, he gets the whole name here, so he makes sure that he knows what he's looking at. Okay, now if you want to avoid wildcards altogether, what we can do is in our formula we can first search for them. So what I'll use is the worksheet function search, and what I'm going to do here is find text. So if I wanted to find, let's say, the E, I would type in E inside quotes. Where am I going to look? I'm going to look in the cell to the left, and the other is optional for where I want to start, so we'll omit that, and I get a 2 because E is the second character in this field. So if I want to search for the asterisk, I can just put in an asterisk, and I get a 1. The reason I got a 1 is because the asterisk in itself is a wild character, so it's going to look here and find the first thing that has a match. The D is a match for a wildcard, so I'm returning 1 here. Now if I actually want to search for the asterisk, what I have to do is put a tilde in here. The tilde is usually to the left of the 1 using the shift key. So if I put this in, I should now get 4, and I got 4. because 4, the asterisk is the 4th character. So if I don't have an asterisk in here, I get a value error. So what I'm going to do to fix this is I'm going to put if error in front of this, and I'm going to say if this is an error, return the value if it's not an error. If it is an error, return 0. Okay, so now no asterisk gives me a 0, an asterisk gives me the number where the asterisk is located. Now I also mentioned earlier that the question mark is also a wildcard character, so we want to make sure that we search for those as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these two together. I'm going to go ahead and add plus, paste this here, and here I'm going to change the asterisk to a question mark. Okay, so if I have a question mark in here, I will get a 4, and notice it'll find the first question mark. If I put it there, I get a 2. If I have a question mark and an asterisk, it'll add the two together. So basically, I'm going to get a number greater than 0 if I have a question mark and or an asterisk in my field on B71. So if I have no question marks, then I'm going to get a 0. Okay. So knowing this, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do an if statement in front of all this. So I put an if, and what I'm going to look for is if this function is greater than 0, and I'll put that in, greater than 0, comma, then the true part, if yes it is greater than 0, that must mean I have a wildcard in there. So I'm going to type in the message, no wildcards, in quotes. If I don't have any wildcards in there, then I can now start with my VLOOKUP. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. VLOOKUP. Okay, what am I looking up? Cell B71, comma, in my table, table parts, comma, I want part ID, which is the second column, comma, and I'm looking for exact match, so I put 0. Alright, and I need another parentheses to close this up. And there we go. Widget is now returning this character here. If I put an asterisk in here, I'm going to get no wildcards. Alright, now I still have an issue because if I put a blank in here, I'm going to get an NA, and I don't want the NA. Alright, so how do we do that? In the beginning, we're going to put another if statement. If, and I'm going to look to the left, equal to the empty cell. If I do have the empty cell, I want to return the empty cell. If I don't have the empty cell, then I'm going to do this formula. So I need a parentheses at the end. Okay, so I have nothing here, and I get nothing here. If I have an asterisk in my field, I then get no wildcards. If I have a question mark in my field, I get no wildcards. If I have the correct component, like say widget, whoop, I actually want to show you that next. Let me put in widget first. Okay, widget, I get the correct part ID. But so now what if I put something that's not in here? If I misspell something? Well, we covered that before. I got the NA. So we're going to take care of that NA. And that NA belongs right here in front of the VLOOKUP because I don't want VLOOKUP to give me an NA. I want it to say, like we said before, not a part. So I'll put my if NA in here, open parentheses. If I am not NA, I'm going to return this, what's here. If it is NA, and I need to put my comma in the right spot here, right after the green parenthesis. Alright, so if I have NA, I'm going to say not a part. Not a part. In quotes. Okay, and I need a ending parenthesis to match up the if statement. And there we go, not a part. So I think I have it now. A blank returns a blank. Something with a question mark in it returns no wildcards. Something with an asterisk in it returns no wildcards. And if I have the correct component, like device, then I'll get the part ID. That's it for VLOOKUP with wildcards. Alright, so we're going to go on to data validation next. Data validation ensures that what you put in here for part name is in this list. Now, to get to data validation, we'll first highlight the cell we want to validate, and we will go to data. We go to data validation, and we hit data validation again. We can also do Alt A V V, and that'll also open it up as well. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to say what we want to allow. So we're going to get our allowance, or what we're going to allow, from a list. That list is going to be from this source. Our source is going to be right here. So from B5 to B8, which is right here, is what we're going to allow somebody to put in here. If they don't put that, we're going to give them a stop message, and that stop message will be, we'll just say stop, and we'll put in here not a part, and hit OK. Alright, now if I type, let's go ahead and put my VLOOKUP in here, and I'll just do a simple VLOOKUP equals VLOOKUP. My lookup value is to the left, comma, TBL parts, comma, 2 for part ID, and still 0 for false. Alright, now I got NA. I didn't take out the blanks. We could do that, but I'm not going to do that again. But if I try to type in something here, device, I get device. If I try to type in something that's not on my list, spring, I get stop, warning, not a part. Hit cancel. I can try something else. Now you also notice I get a drop down here. I will get a drop down for everything that is in my acceptable list. So I could just pick gadget and go right to gadget here. One word of caution is if this list is a long list, you may want to ensure that it's in alphabetical order, so that when the person gets their list here, it'll also be in alphabetical order. Another word of caution is wildcards are still accepted. The data validation will say that's acceptable because it will be a match. So if I put in GAD and an asterisk, I won't get an error because that is a match. Alright, moving on. Getting data in more than one field. So right now I have gadget as my part name. I'm going to put my VLOOKUP again, just like I've been doing. VLOOKUP. My cell to the left, comma, table parts, column index, part ID, that's the second column, comma, and I want 0 still for an exact match. Now I'm going to go back here, this cell B81, because I'm going to be copying it, I'm going to be moving to the right, but I want it to always refer to B81. I'm going to make that an absolute reference by locking it and hitting F4 in order to put the dollar signs in. Really I only need the dollar sign on the B, and I'm going to do just that. So get rid of this dollar sign just to show you, and go ahead and hit enter. Whoops, B81, and hit enter. Alright, so this is done here. Now what I can do is I can copy this over to here, but notice I get the same results. I don't get wholesale and retail. So what I could do is I can manually change this to 3 and manually change this to 4, and that will work. And it always looked the part name for gadget, or I always looked at this cell for part name because I locked the column. So as I copied to the right, the B did not move over to the right each time. Now that may be easy to do because I only have 3 cells here, but what if I had 50 or 60 or even a couple of hundred cells going to the right? That would be a lot of changing of numbers. So we can do that another way. So we'll start off with our VLOOKUP again. You know what? And I'm just going to copy this cell, put it right here. That works. I only locked the B, so this allowed me to copy down, but it only locked the B. The 84 changed the correct row, 84, and table parts 2 and 0. Now the 2 is what needs to change as I move to the right. So instead of 2, I'm going to use the columns function, columns, and then split the S, columns. Now what that does is it counts the number of columns in an array. So I'm going to highlight from C84 to B84 to C84, which is 2. Now I'm going to lock the B by putting a dollar sign in front of it. Alright, so now I have my columns, and I want to put a closed parentheses after the array of the columns, and that should be it. So what do I have? I'm going to look at this cell B84 and in table parts find it And what row do I want? I want the second row. Well, my second row is columns B84 through C84. That looks at B84 through C84, which is 2 columns wide. It's going to return a 2, and then 0 for false still. And that worked. Now notice I can go ahead and copy this, bring it to the right, and these copy over, because now this columns is showing a 3 and this one is showing a 4. And we'll go ahead and click on the function key. You can see that here. The cell B84 sees gadget. Table parts sees this table. Columns sees a 4, because this column from B84 to E84 is 4 columns wide, and then range lookup is still false. Alright, now one more thing on this sheet that we're going to cover, and that's a horizontal table orientation. Notice this is the same information as in the table we've been using, except for the list is now in a horizontal fashion. So you can probably guess what we're going to use. It's H lookup. And the lookup value will be the cell to the left. Our table, I need to highlight this new table here, and I'll make it absolute by hitting F4. Comma, instead of column index, it's going to be row index. I want part ID. It's the second row, 2. And comma 0 for an exact match. And it's the same thing. So H lookup works just like B lookup. Only difference is that your table is in a different orientation. So I just want to point that out. All the other differences between VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP are the same. Now we're going to go to sheet 2. Okay, adding a record to the table. Here I have a table, and it's very much like the table we had before. The only difference is it's not labeled or named TBL parts. It has no name, so you'd have to refer to the cell references or create a name for this table. Over here I already have some VLOOKUPs made. The only difference between the two is this one uses data validation, and I have a drop down which I can use to get my data. So these are already working fine. So now let's say I want to add a record to the table, and I type in the word spring, because I'm going to add the part name of spring. And I'm going to make up here a part number using the same format we had before. And a cost, let's just say $15.25 of wholesale and retail of $30.95. Okay. Now that I've added this, if I go in here and I type in spring, it's not going to work. It's saying spring is not in my part name. The reason? Because my cell reference, which was locked, is only through cell or through row 9, through row 6 to row 9. So I don't have that there. Now I could change this to a 10, and now it would work. Now spring is changed, and part ID is updated for the new part ID. And I can do that here as well and change this to a 10. And there, that changes. However, my data validation doesn't include spring, because my data validation didn't include that that new row. So what I would have to do is go back to data validation and include another cell here. So we go to B10. Okay, and now that works. Now that could get a little problematic if you keep adding records to your table, and you had to change that every single time. So if your table allows for records to be added, you may want to consider making this an official table. I call it official table. It's just that it's just called a table, but we've already been calling this a table. So to do that, we go to Insert, Table. You can also use Control T or Alt and T. So we hit table. It's highlighted this table here. Now I do not want to include the add a record to table in my table name, but I do want to include the headers. So we're going to change the starting from B4 to B5. And what I could have done is just highlight that table to begin. Well, matter of fact, I'll do that. Let me just highlight what I want to be the table. I'll hit Control T to make that a table. It now knows my table has a header, which means this first row is a header row, and I'll hit OK. Alright, notice I do get drop downs, which gives me some additional features like sorting or filtering. Now let's say here I'm going to add another part, and that's just going to be a, let's see, SPROC Sprocker, and it has a part ID of RE5-YT5 and a cost of $42.25 and a retail of $60.95. Okay, now let's take a look. In here I put in Sprocker, and sure enough it worked. Now look at my data validation. It's also got a Sprocker, and that worked as well. So that is something to use this insert table in order to make your range expand as you add something. If you notice here, take a look at your range. Your range now goes to E11 in both cases, and that happened automatically because this was a inserted table. To remove this table, if we didn't want this table and it was already there, we click somewhere on the table, we have the table tools design selected, and then we just go convert to range, and that'll make, do you want to convert this table to a normal range? Hit yes. Now it's back like it was before in just a normal range, but these are still the same. These haven't changed. We're including the whole table here. Here I have a cross table. Now this is where I have to look up one thing on the vertical part of things and another part on the horizontal. So let's say I could have a Model Z device or a Model J device or gadget. There's many of these parts for different models. So I have a drop down here made already for data validation, and I can select any one of the ones, and notice it highlights in red just to make it easier to find. That's something I did with conditional formatting. And same with here, the part name. I can select any part name, and what I want this result to be is the results of the Model J and gadget. So I would want this part ID for this selection. Now if you notice I said vertical and horizontal, you might think I'd be able to create a worksheet function using both vertical and horizontal together, but that doesn't work out well. So what I'll do is I'll start off with VLOOKUP again, just like I've been doing before. So equal sign VLOOKUP. My lookup value, well, I'm going to start with gadget, and then I'm going to put comma, and I'm going to put my table array. So my table array includes the part names, because don't forget the lookup value is always going to look at the leftmost part of your table array. So these need to be included. Don't forget that. Just like we've been doing all along, I'm going to use F4 to lock it in place, comma, column index number. Well, right now I have Model J selected, so right now in my column I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just going to put a 4 there for now, comma, still dealing with false. We haven't got to approximate matches yet. Alright, so there it is, and here I have it highlighted. Did that also with conditional formatting. So now if I go ahead and change the gadget to device, that's going to work out fine, but the problem is I've locked this to column 4. So if I change my model to Model Z, I should be getting this result, but I'm still getting this result. Alright, so how do I change this to Model Z? What I'm going to do is, instead of a 4, I'm going to use the match function. So I'm going to type in, I highlighted the 4, and I'm going to type in match. And what that does is it has a lookup value just like VLOOKUP does. Well, what I'm going to look up this time is Model Z, or whatever's in cell J17, comma, my lookup array. Well, my lookup array is right here. I'm going to look up these cells right there, and I'm going to lock it, F4. And comma, my match type, once again, we're just going to stick with an exact match, so it's going to be a 0, and I'm going to close this parenthesis. So now this is my column, my formula for my column. So does it work? It does not. Why not? Alright, let's take a look at this again. What did I do? Let's back up. Let's take a look at the function. My column index is right here, but I got a value of 1 because model Z is in my first row. This is my first row for my table array for my VLOOKUP. So this is row 1 for my VLOOKUP, this is row 2 for my VLOOKUP, but this is row 1 for my match. So if I just add 1 to my column, or to match, to give me a column index number, then I should be okay. So let's take a look. Match. We'll go ahead and after the red parentheses, we will add 1. And there we go. And I can go ahead and change this to model K and get this result here.
The next topic is duplicates. In this table, much like the cross table up above, the device alone, or the part name alone, cannot give you a specific unique record. So in order to get, let's say, the part ID, I need the device and the model ID to get a part ID, just like I did with the cross table. Now, the difference in this table is that it's laid out differently, and I not only get part ID, I can get stock code or retail, or it can be in multiple things here. So that's not very practical to do in a cross table. So what we're going to do here is I have here, similar to what I had up above, is I have here a data validation already set up for the model, and I have data validation already set up for the part name, and I want to return the stock code. Now, in order to do this, I need to combine these two columns and make a third column that combines both of them in order to get a unique record, because I can only look up one record or one column in my VLOOKUP. So I'm going to take this table here, or this part of the table, highlight it. We're going to go ahead and move it 1 to the right. Now here we're going to combine this field with this field, and the way we're going to do that is we'll use equals. We'll select two fields to the left, in this case B26. I'll use the ampersand, and in this case I'm going to use the vertical line, which is located above your, usually above your enter key with hitting shift, and that needs to be in quotes. Then another ampersand, and we're going to get this field directly to the left, cell C26, and that right there combines those two fields into one field. Okay, now I'm going to do that all the way down, and now you can see each one of these cells shows the combination of the two cells to the left with that vertical line in between. Now let me go ahead and format this so it looks correct. I'll go ahead and copy, paste the format here, copy this, paste that format here. Okay. Alright, now we'll go ahead and in my field over here next to stock code, I want to return the stock code for a Model J sprocket. So what I'll do is I'll start with my VLOOKUP, and what am I looking up? Well, I have the part name and the model to look up together combined as one field. So that's what we're going to do here. We'll do one cell up, and then we'll put the and symbol. We'll put the vertical line in quotes, another and symbol, and then two cells up, which is J26. Okay, there's my lookup value. Now my column index, my table array, I'll go ahead and highlight my table, and I'll make that, hit F4 to make that absolute, comma, my column index number. Well, I want the part ID, no, I want the stock code. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 columns over, comma, and a 0 for exact match. Alright, now I get the NA. Why did I get the NA? Well, if you look at this, my table that I'm looking up is this entire table, but if you remember, the lookup value needs to be in the leftmost column. This is my leftmost column. This is the column I actually want to look up. So I need to modify my table to not include these first two columns. So we'll change the B to a D, and now I will have the right table to look up. Alright, now I got a different error. This is a reference error. This usually means that you're looking up a column that isn't in your table. And that's exactly what we've done. Because I've changed my table, my column is now not the 5th column. It is the 1, 2, 3rd column. So change the 5 to a 3, and now I'll get my result. And here I have it highlighted so that you can see I have a match. That's it for duplicates. Now we're going to move on to sheet 3. On sheet 3 we have a new table here. This table is a sales and commission table. So if a salesperson sells a certain amount up to but not including $1,000, they get 5% commission. Once they hit $1,000 in sales, they get 5.5% commission all the way up into but not including 2,000. At 2,000 they will go to 6%, at 5,007 and so forth all the way up to 12,500, and above that point they get 20% commission. Now so far when we've been talking about VLOOKUP, it's been with a range lookup of false. Now we're going to change that to a range lookup of true, which means an approximate match. And the approximate match, I'll explain that in a minute, but to designate the range lookup to be true, we can either leave it blank or don't include it at all. We can make it true, or we can make it a 1. Any one of those will match. So let's look at this table down here below. We're going to put in our actual sales. So let's just say right now $1,002. Our commission we're going to get from this table. We're going to look at this table, and for $2 we should get 5.5%. And our earnings will simply be the table, the actual sale, times the commission. Alright, so now we're going to use VLOOKUP to get the commission. And here we're going to use the true range lookup. Now, the way this works is if you have a true range lookup, it's going to look up in this table and look for an exact match. If it has an exact match, that's what it's going to use. If no exact match is there, then it's going to use the largest value that is less than the lookup value. So, for example, all these are less than my first lookup value, which is 1,002. It's going to use the largest one, which is 1,000. If my actual sale was, or let's say our next example is going to be $5,000.01, in that case, all these are less than, I don't have an exact match, and all these are less than $5,000.01. So it's going to use the largest, which is 7%. Now, very important, these must be in ascending order. If they're not in ascending order, it's not going to work. That is crucial for this VLOOKUP with approximate match to work. So let's go ahead and do that. So our commission is going to be equals VLOOKUP, and our lookup value is 1 to the left. Our table array, comma, that's what I meant to hit. Our table array is here, and I'm going to lock it, F4, comma, column index number. Commission is in the second column, so hit a 2, comma, and now we're going to do true, which I can just omit it, or I can put true, and I'll do that, and enter. Okay, so I have $1,002. That should be 5.5% commission, and that's what I got here, and it does the calculation. So let's go ahead and put other numbers in here. Let's say $9,999.99. Let's put in 12,900, and let's just put in 0. Okay, I'm going to copy these down by double clicking here, and there, it's done. So for $1,002, we said we have 5.5. For 5,001, that is, $5,000.01. That is here, 5,000 mark. I've reached the 5,000 mark. For $9,999.99, I didn't quite make the 10,000, so I'm still only at 7%. And here at 12,900, I've maxed out. I'm at 20%, and 0 is also 5%, but my earnings is still 5%. If I had a negative number here, something negative, let's say 200, which isn't realistic for sales, then I get the return of NA, and we showed you how to eliminate that
In this case, I would probably look for a negative number and say that's not a valid entry. So we'll go ahead and put in, let's say 800, and I get a result. Going on to sheet 4.
On sheet 4, we have troubleshooting the NA result. Here I have the same table we've been working with on the previous sheets listed here, and down below I have two examples of results getting me the NA. Now we get NA usually for one of two reasons. Reason one shown here is the lookup value, in this case spring, is not in the leftmost column of my table array, which right here is my table array. If you look here, highlighted in red, there's my table array. Spring is not listed there. So that's one reason we get an NA result. The other reason is the lookup value is blank, and that can be easily resolved with an if statement looking for a blank in your lookup value cell. The first one isn't always as obvious, so I'm going to go through some examples that show you when you get NA if you're not careful. So here I'll start with my VLOOKUP again. VLOOKUP, my lookup value is the cell to the left, comma, my table is here, comma, column index, I want part ID, so number 2, comma, and then 0 for false. And I get the correct result. Now I'll copy this down, and you notice on the third one I get NA. The reason I get NA here is because when I made my table array, I did not make it absolute, so when I copied it down, it moved down with it, and now I'm outside the range. Device is not in my table array, so I get the result of NA. So to fix this, I need to make this absolute by hitting the F4 key, and then I can go ahead and copy it down, and that eliminates the NA. Another example here, I have a filter table. This shows the filter ID, filter sizes, and stock code numbers. On the table below, I have model numbers. Notice the model number, the last 3 digits of the model number is the filter ID. So if I have the model number, I could get the stock code. And here's how we'll do that. I'll start with my VLOOKUP command. Then I will use the right 3 characters from the model number. So to do that, I type in right, open parentheses, the cell to the left, comma, 3. So that means take the cell to the left and give me the 3 right characters, so that'll be 154. I'll close the parentheses for there. There's my VLOOKUP. Now I want my table array. I will highlight this table here. I'll F4 to make it absolute, comma, I want the stock code, that's the third column, and comma 0 for an exact match. And I get an NA and NA. Alright, why did I get an NA here? 154 is a match. Alright, take a look at this a little closer. Over here, I'm going to put that same command, right, this cell here, comma 3, and there's my 154. Now the cell to the right, I'm going to say equals the cell to my left equals 154. If these are equal, I'll get a true. Well, I get a false. The reason I get a false is because I'm taking a character string here, I'm taking the right characters, and that is a text string. This is text. This is a numeric value of 154. These are not considered a match. So that's something we have to look for when we're dealing with text here and numbers here. What I did was I formatted these all to the left. If I took the format away, you'll see them to the right. Number fields get automatically default to right alignment, and text are left alignment. So that's one of the reasons we'll get NA here is we don't have a match. So how do I resolve this? Well, one way to do it is in this right command right after it, I can add 0 to it. If I add 0 to a text cell that has a numeric value associated with it, then I will turn this back into a number. And notice now I get the stock code number for 154, filter ID 154, and there it is. Alright, so let's go ahead and copy this down. And I still get an NA here. Well, let's take a look again. I will take a look at those right 3 characters on this model number, comma 3. Okay, look at that. I don't even have to do the equals. I can see 58 does not equal the 358 I was expecting over here. The reason
this cell has got an extra space in it. So an extra space was added, so I'm ended up with 58 instead of 358. So how do we resolve that? One way is to remove the extra space after 358, but sometimes that's not always an option. So what we can do is we can use the command trim. The command trim removes excess spaces that are in your cell, example spaces that are not between two other characters, like between two words. So to do that, here's B35. I will put the word trim right before that with an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. Now that cell is trimmed. That'll get rid of the extra space after the 8, and there I got a match. Alright, so let's move down some more. Here's some other examples of non-matches. Although these all look like they're matches, they are in fact not. And I'll do the test here. Equals cell to the left, 2 to the left, equals the cell to the left. That will be true if they're a match, false if they're not a match, and I get a false. Let me copy this down, and they're all false. With the first case we've already discussed, that shows here I have an extra space after the word gadget, and we know how to use trim to get rid of that. Here, another example we've already discussed. In this case, this is a text, this is a numeric value, so I get a value of false. Okay, both of these are numeric values, but yet they look the same, but they're not the same. The reason is the one on the left is actually a date and a time, but I'm only showing the date. If you look up here in the formula bar, you can see that this is 1/12/2015 at 5 a.m., where this one here is just simply 1/12/2015. So only the date is shown, even though there is time associated with it. Therefore, it's not a match. Finally, here I have two numbers. Both are showing 52. This is very similar to the one above. This one is showing only no decimal places, but it's actually 52.36, and this one here is actually 52. So we don't have a match. Let's move down some more. Okay, this table here, I want the stock code for this part ID. So what do? Equals VLOOKUP, and I want the cell to the left, comma, here's my table. I'll use F4 to lock it, comma, let's see, stock code is in 1, 2, 3, 4th column over, and 0 for exact match. And I get an NA. Why do I get an NA here? Well, this is not equal to this, and before we can check for extra spaces, that's not the case, but actually it is the case. The part ID in my original table has an extra space, so my table array has got some errors associated with it with extra spaces. So one way to fix that is to go through all your part IDs and make sure they don't have extra spaces. Sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes you're getting your table data from another source and you don't have any control over it. So what can we do there? Well, we can trim the entire table. But if I hit enter, I'm going to get a error, a value error. Okay, the reason is I can't use trim, simply use trim on a array. To do that, it can be done, but I have to define this as an array. So what I do is I hit Control, Shift, Enter, and now it works. Notice up in my formula bar, I have these squiggly brackets around the entire formula. That's designating that this is an array formula, because trim is working on an array. The only other thing I want to show you, and I don't have an example, is the command clean, or the worksheet function clean. That also removes extraneous characters that are non-printable but sometimes get copied over when you're copying tables over from another source. So that completes VLOOKUP. Hope you learned something. Please comment below. Thank you.